Yo, this is Fling with the FS Army, and today we are looking back at the Millie Maker Week 18, top 10 in the contest, and what won it. So let's do it. All right, guys. So, you know, week 18 is always a crazy one. There's a lot of teams with, no playoff implications. There's teams that are fighting for the playoffs. It's kind of like preseason. We don't know, if a team's going to play their first string, their second string, their third string, what guys they want to get a look at and evaluate before the end of the season. So it's always a little crazy, but I like trying to figure it out. It's like a new puzzle and it's fun. It's fun. It's different, and there's a lot of different ways you can go with it. So when we look at some of the top DFS players, you're going to see guys who had a very tight player pool and guys who had a large player pool, just trying to get a mix of enough of those turds that you hopefully get that one and that line up with the studs. So you see more um, studs and scrubs type of approach for it. So let's get into it. The winning lineup, 234 points. And by the way, wasn't even the highest score on the day. We got DFS Army VIP who had the high score for the day. So we're going to get into that in a minute. But the winning lineup, I got to tell you, I'm a Broncos fan. I love it. Bo Nix, double stack with Denver defense, and in the playoff drought, making the playoffs for the first time in 8 years. And yeah, sure, it was against, Carson Wentz and a bunch of backups, but nonetheless, took care of business 38-0. Nix to Sutton to Mims. And, overall, the Sutton was the only chalk piece, kind of a one-off in a lot of lineups, but Nix and Mims was really what differentiated this lineup, this stack. So Denver D was chalk, Cortland Sutton was chalk. Overall, this lineup was 164%. So chalk, but there were a few spots that got different. Really, it was Nix, it was Mims, and it was Jacoby Myers at 5%. We also had Bijan chalk. This was good chop going against the worst run defense in the league in Carolina. We had Michael Carter chalk. He had looked good in the past as a backup. And knowing that there was no one else, he was going to get the workload at 4,700. That was chalk that a lot of DFS Army VIPs like myself were willing to eat and ended up paying off. Love Drake London with Mooney out. You felt like he was going to get a ton of targets, and he did. I think he had like 8 targets and like 80 yards and a touchdown at halftime. So he absolutely smashed 43 points. Was the guy you had to have. This slate was crazy because there were like, I think 9 quarterbacks with 25 or more points, 3 quarterbacks with 30 or more points. And, there was running backs came out of nowhere that scored 25 plus, like Miles Sanders. And then there was a bunch of wide receivers that had great days. And obviously, London was the top dog with the gotta have it score. Really, Bijan Robinson and Drake London, that was another stack, that secondary stack that you really had to have on this slate. You'll see it in a lot of these top 10 lineups. And then Jacoby Myers, really good performance from him at low ownership. And, you knew he was going to play, and he had come down in price a little bit. So I think personally, this was like one of my mistakes of the slate. And, this was the mistake of the field, is just completely overlooking Jacoby Myers. Sure, they had nothing to play for except pride. So really in these scenarios, and what you want to think about when we do this next year is you want to be aware of the teams who are in the playoffs but have nothing to gain in week 18. The teams that are out of it, they're still playing. So a guy like Jacoby Myers is going to get plenty of run, and this was a good spot for him in a divisional matchup. And he got a lot of targets, got 30 points, smashed. So great lineup. Now, need lunch money. This is a top DFS pro. He got second place. We're going to look at his MME strategy here in a second. But speaking of that Jacoby Myers play, this one from the other side of that game, Justin Herbert to Quentin Johnson. This had Bijan. This had Bucky. Bucky did not have a gotta have it score. And really, had he had anyone else but Bucky in this lineup, would have took it down because those were only 3 points behind first place. But and Juwan, and this sucks too, right? Jawan Jennings gets ejected from that game. You lose by 3 points. You have Jawan Jennings. He gets ejected from the game. I thought I was pissed about Jawan Jennings get ejected and, killing some of my afternoon lineups and, main lineups as well. But can you imagine being second place in the millie and one of your guys gets ejected from the game early? One catch, he could get there. And certainly in a PPR format, he probably does get there and need lunch money is in the millie for uh, a very big day because he had two lineups in this thing. In I believe two lineups in not in this contest in the top five, but he did have um yeah, he did actually. Now I see it here. That they won't show it twice in the leaderboards. So second place, fifth place, promise you he does not need lunch money. Fantastic day for him. And we'll get into his MME strategy here in a second. Third place, Bryce Young. This is Bryce Young to Coker stack with a Bijan, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts bring back. And yeah, unconventional lineup. You have, QB plus one with three bringbacks. Typically, you don't see that a whole lot. And had JT, had McMillan. Coker was fine, but Kyle Pitts really crushed this lineup. Surprise, surprise. Kyle Pitts sucks. Quentin Johnston and Denver D. So Johnston was another guy that, you saw stacked with Herbert and really smashed at 4,834 points. But London and Bijan were really the kind of the gotta have it stack. Fourth place, Knicks stacked to Mims. This one without Sutton. Bijan, Carter, Evans, London, Mims, Moreau, Johnston, and Denver D. So 227 points. So Mims plus one. This was sixth place. Let's look at need lunch money for his fifth place lineup. That was Herbert to McConkey to Quentin Johnston, um, Bijan Sanders. And Sanders was really good, plays well. We were on him in cash. We were on him in tournaments just because he was 4K and, projected to get the start. And, he's produced some pretty decent games in the past. So totally understand that. And obviously, McConkey's really the guy that you want most weeks with Herbert, but Johnson was the guy that doubled his score this week. He had that double, had some, with and without. So, QB plus one, QB plus two, McBride, Winnington, and Green Bay D. It was interesting. Green Bay D ended up being chalk because, they definitely, or not necessarily chalk, I would say, but, some of the pros that I was looking at actually were on them a lot. And then, this sixth place lineup was Appendix to Bijan to London. I like that, including the running back in the line, especially pass catching running back like Bijan. Carter, Brian Thomas Jr. wasn't the week for BTJ at 7,300, but certainly did enough that he didn't crash your lineups. Pearsall, another good week for Pearsall back to back. He's a guy we definitely want to be thinking about in best ball for the 2025 NFL season. McBride, Sanders, and Denver D finishing this one out. And yeah, this was a Penix plus two, and with the two guys that you needed, and a Miles Sanders bring back. Let's look at Lucas Wayne here, eighth place. Another Knicks lineup. This one was a naked Knicks lineup, and he did enough running that it could have made more sense on this slate. Especially because he threw a touchdown to Sutton, he threw a touchdown to Vele, he threw a touchdown to Mims. So none of the guys really smashed. Mims did for a salary, but not Sutton. So this lineup actually could have been optimal if you ran it out enough times and you certainly got the right combination, but pretty close, good enough for 6,900 profit. And yeah, just, not enough from Downs, McBride, and Hooper there to take it down, but pretty good. Dobbs to Pearsall. Not the last time we're going to see Dobbs for sure. Bijan London, two guys you had to have. Jonathan Taylor had a great day. This one had Mims in it. So it looks like he had 10 lineups, and just a little strange that I guess recency bias put him on Mims, but little strange to have him without Knicks, and I'm guessing there was a hand built because he only did 10 lineups. And then 10th place here, Knicks to Mims and Sutton. So this was a double, a Mims double. Again, just like we saw in the Millie Maker, a Mims double to Sutton and our Knicks double to Sutton and Mims. And then Bijan and Drake London secondary stack, Rico Dowdle, Jalen McMillan, Zach Ertz, and New York D. So let's kind of take a look at some MME strategy. And by the way, if you guys like these breakdowns, if you've liked them all season long, this is the last one. It's a little bittersweet, but let me know. Hit that like button, comment. Let me know, your favorite thing from these breakdowns this year. And speaking of, when I say that we beat the Millie Maker, the DFS Army VIP beat the Millie Maker, Bettman, I know he watches these breakdowns, or at least some of the other videos that I've done, and watches all the DFS Army content. He won the mini max, and of course, I knew this was going to happen, but it's fine. We'll go with it. He won the mini max 10K, and this is what it's funny because I put out a tweet last week, and one of the things I said was, yes, we are reviewing the Millie Maker. And I understand a lot of people, they don't want to play the Millie Maker because it's a lotto ticket. And, you definitely don't want to max it, right? $20 times 150, that's $3,000 a slate. Most people don't have that kind of money to responsibly MME the Millie Maker. But as I said, these rules, these principles, these strategies, that we learn by studying these winning lineups, looking at what DFS pros are doing, these can be applied to all large field GPP contests, like the mini max that Bettman won this week. $150 in, $10,000 out, and he crushed this slate. Like, he had first place. Actually, that's not even, he had first place. I could have sworn he had like fifth place or something too. But he had first place, 27th place, 34th. Like, this type of consistency is 76. And, we're going to see his MME strategy real quick. He has a small pool of players. So, specifically on this slate on week 18, I think more than most weeks, there's kind of a couple of ways to attack it. You can go flat, and you can go heavy on a couple spots that you really like. Maybe you really like Bijan Robinson. Maybe you really like Bo Nix lineups this week, for example, and then go flat everywhere else. Or you can just hone in on like a couple of game environments, and that's really what Bettman did here. You see Bo Nix double stack with Mims and Sutton. Now, I know Geek was talking about Mims. Obviously, I'm a fan of Mims as a Broncos fan. He's been more involved in the offense. I know they mentioned Ricky Pearsall on Tournament Tactics on this channel. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, by the way, so you don't miss it. Every week when we drop content, that was a gem they gave out on Tournament Tactics. Ricky Pearsall getting involved last week. Juwan Jennings going to be chalk. Let's go to Ricky Pearsall in this game. And that's the play that you needed. Obviously, had that Bijan and Drake London secondary stack, had the Miles Sanders play. This is a play that we got on just because 4K getting the start in, a pretty high game environment. It made sense. And, 26 points he delivered. And then McBride, you're paying down for guys like Miles Sanders and Marvin Mims and Ricky Pearsall. You can afford to pay up tight end. McBride, Cortland Sutton in the flex, pay up defense, 237 points, 3 points higher than the Millie Maker. So this isn't the first time and only time we'll see this, but just wanted to go over this real quick. Small pool of players. Penix, Flacco, Daniels, Nix, Baker Mayfield. I thought that Washington might play Daniels the whole game, so I played a lot of Daniels as well. Got burned on him on the slate, but also played a good amount of Baker, Nix, Penix. So, being on the right plays certainly is what you need to do. Now, what is crazy, and this isn't the first time I will see this, I got burned on Blake Corum. He comes in, gets 2 carries for 10 yards, looks like he's on his way to a smash game, and then he breaks his forearm and he's out the game. and just terrible because he was low owned and looks like he was going to smash. This probably you would think that would have crushed him, but his pool was so tight that everywhere else he kind of just did very well or well enough. Bijan, even with the field on Michael Carter, 38% Charbonnet, 40% Bucky, and 19% Sanders. So enough positive leverage at uh, you know 4K. That was really what he needed. And then what we're gonna see here, Pearsall, a lot of Pearsall, a lot of Mims. So like these Mims and Pearsall lineups, they really made up for having 25% of the lineups being Blake Corum, even with Drake London. So had the Juwan Jennings fade. You needed that fade for sure. 27% owned and was way under there. Even on JSN, so it didn't hurt that bad. Pittman had a pretty decent day. Downs had a good day. Pittman, Mike Evans did enough. Peyton Hendershot, I think he caught a couple balls, but Trey McBride, almost even with the field there. I'm gonna guess a good amount of Denver D, even with the field. So yeah, and really this consistency here was 237, 220, 219, 215, 214, 214. So that type of consistency is really, and that's something I see with Giant Squid a lot when I look at his lineups. Like his pool is it's just so close. Like it's just one. He may have like a wide range of players, but like all his top lineups are just like so close to one another, and it's that type of consistency that really can help you, finally break through and win that large field GPP when you are onto that to the right pool of players that day. So, one to look real quick at Shrek here. Shrek is a top DFS player as well. I know Shrek kind of is more has been more of a like a showdown player, but still crushing as well with the main slates. So we're gonna look his lineup just real quick, and then we're gonna look at Need Lunch Money because Need Lunch Money is he's been one of the top DFS pros for years. So I want to just take a look at his MME strategy. Shrek's top lineup: Bryce Young, Adam Thielen, with Bijan, Drake London, bring back Michael Carter, Josh Downs, Zach Ertz, Jacoby Myers, Denver D, 219 points, 217, 212. So there's that kind of consistency that I was talking about when we were looking at Bentman's winning minimax lineup. And so even with the field on Baker, even on Dobbs, not like a very small pool of quarterbacks, 11 quarterbacks. Murray, Knicks basically even with the field. So flat at quarterback, no big stands. Obviously, there's some guys that didn't play, and that's going to be obvious, pretty obvious on a slate like this. There's a lot of guys that just aren't playing, like Mahomes. Now, same thing. He had like 35% Blake Corum, and if he two things, if Blake Corum doesn't get hurt, he might have actually won the Millie Maker because he was pretty close and he had a lot of exposure to him. Or if you just full faded him, it's just one decision. That's really all it is oftentimes when you're this close to the top. Michael Carter, Bucky Irving, um, over the field on Sanders. So double the field on Sanders, slightly under on Bijan. So, 34% there. Nothing else really stands out too much. A little under on JT. No big fades that I can see right off the bat. Now, a good amount of Drake London, good amount of Brian Thomas, Juwan Jennings, and gosh, he had 35% Corum, 30% Jennings, and still almost took down the Millie Maker. That's wild. But yeah, 22% Jacoby Myers. That'll certainly help. Just, one player that's like a 5 to 6K player that you're really over the field on and absolutely smashed. His fade was Mike Evans, and I get that 8K. And honestly, from a tournament winning value standpoint, it was a correct fade to be under him. So that helps. Okay. Being under the field, half the field on a 44% player of Mike Evans, who got like 17 points, which was nowhere near the top. Also faded JSN. So, those are a couple good fades there. Triple the field on Bowers, had a pretty good day. So paid up at tight end with Bowers and McBride. 1% Pitts. That's certainly where you wanted to be. And then 42% Denver D, and being double the field on a defense that scores 15, 16 points. That is certainly how you do it. So let's take a look at need lunch money's exposures. We already saw his top two lineups that plays second and fifth in the Millie Maker. So, he really crushed it, and he had 35% Dobbs. So a lot of Dobbs. He faded Baker, and, Baker did good, but not, wasn't the nuts. Faded Gino, faded Baker. I was surprised by this. He did so well, and yet he had no Knicks, who was the nuts. And that's kind of like what I was saying. It speaks to how crazy the slate was, because there were so many quarterbacks that absolutely smashed. And he had a good amount of Penix. Penix smashed. Dobbs did good for his salary, for his 4K salary. Rogers threw 4 touchdowns. Now Gino threw 4 touchdowns as well. Gino had a good day. Where was the other one? Did he have any Bryce? No Bryce. Yeah, but he had enough of the guys that you needed at quarterback, or at least some guys that had one of the higher scores on the slate. 56% Bucky, so was very heavy on Bucky and Bijan. Those were his stands of the slate. At running back, also Michael Carter, like 50%. So yeah, you got all these guys at basically like 50%, which means obviously he played a lot of running back in the flex. Faded Blake Corum, so that is obviously something that very much helped get that second and fifth place spot. And 21% Miles Sanders. So, really, Tony Pollard didn't have the best day, but didn't kill a ton of lineups anyway. But yeah, I mean, there was no landmines at running back that crushed him. Had 39% Drake London, so almost triple the field there. Downs, JSN that and Jennings. So, definitely more than you wanted of those guys, but 39% Drake London, under on Evans, under on Sutton, 3% Ricky Pearsall. I don't think he had any Mims at all, actually, because he didn't have any Bo Nix. 54% Trey McBride. So, playing really taking some hard stands in a couple spots. You saw didn't have a small quarterback pool. A couple guys really liked. Um, he played 105 players, so yeah, he actually had a pretty wide pool of players. That's a lot of players. That's a lot of running backs. Was really in on Bijan, Michael Carter, and Bucky Irving, but played a lot of quarterbacks actually. Just had Dobbs at 35% and Penix. So, 55% of his lineups were these two, but everywhere else, we're talking like 8% and lower. So just really spread out between a lot of different guys: Trubisky, Levis, Locke, Tanner McKee, Mac Jones. And then at wide receiver, same thing. This is a wide pool of wide receivers. Zacchaeus, Tolbert, Juju, Anais Smith, Parker Washington. So a lot of different names here going in several spots, and then just really mixing it up with a lot of these cheapos. And I think that's really more times than not how you'd want to play a slate like this. So let's see what he did defense. And yeah, 21% Denver D, 21% Green Bay, and faded the Giants in Tampa. So was looking for these pay ups, these 3K pay ups, and it was certainly a slate to do it. So, you know what, guys, that's going to wrap it up for their last Millie Maker winner of the season. And by the way, if and Millie Maker review this season, you made it this far, want to share a little bit with you of kind of overall seasonal averages for the Millie Maker. So we had 230 points across the season. The average total ownership was 113%. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, most of the weeks actually had some type of primary stack. I think there was 2 or 3 that were unstacked, and almost every week there was also a secondary stack. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're building for large field GPPs, secondary stacks are something that you cannot forget, as we saw with, this top lineup here with Drake London and Bijan Robinson. This is kind of a staple of winning large field GPPs, is that secondary stack, as much correlation as you can put it as possible. Now, believe it or not, wide receiver and running back was almost dead even in the flex this year. That is something that I don't know that that's going to continue next year. We saw running back really dominate the league this year. I think maybe it's more likely that, you know, it'll go back to the norm and these running backs will get hurt like they normally do. And, we won't see as many wide receiver injuries as we have this year, with like the Brandon Ayuk's, Nico Collins missed significant time, things like that. And maybe it'll go back, especially on DraftKings, to more of wide receivers being in the flex the most time. Tight end was in the flex twice, wide receiver 8, running back 8. So something to keep in mind for next year. I definitely would be more open to having running back in the flex in more of my lineups than I have in the past. But this year it was 50-50. So that was definitely a trend to keep an eye out for going into next year. But really appreciate those who watched these breakdowns this year. We got, if you're a DFS Army s- subscriber, if you're a DFS Army VIP, we got a lot more content coming your way. The season is not over because we have the wild card round, we have the divisional round, we have the conference championships, and then of course we have the Super Bowl. So stay with us, and that's going to do it for this one. We will see you all soon. Take care.